cabin in the woods. The dense forest loomed like a shroud of darkness, its towering trees swaying under the ominous whispers of the night wind. Far from any sign of civilization, a lonely cabin stood in haunting silence, bathed in the eerie glow of moonlight breaking through the dense canopy. This was no ordinary forest. It was ancient, mysterious, and brimming with secrets untold. Naomi, a storyteller renowned for her chilling narratives, arrived at the cabin with her closest friends. Alex, a skeptic with a sharp tongue, Eva, brave yet reckless, and Liam, the tech-savvy realist. They had come seeking inspiration for Naomi's next tale, unaware they were about to live through a story darker than anything Naomi had ever conjured. The uneasy arrival. From the moment they stepped into the cabin, Naomi felt it, an oppressive weight in the air, as if the walls themselves were alive and watching. Among the dusty books lining the shelves, one stood out, a leather-bound journal with a faded title, The Forsaken Chronicles. Unable to resist, Naomi opened it. The pages were filled with cryptic sketches of a shadowy figure and chilling words scrawled in crimson ink. Beware the watcher in the woods. Alex laughed it off, dismissing it as an old prank. Classic scare tactics, he scoffed. But Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that the warning was meant for them. The first night. As night fell, the group gathered around the fireplace, sharing stories to pass the time. Naomi decided to recount a tale about a forest haunted by a malevolent entity known as the Watcher. As she spun her story, the wind outside began to howl, and the windows rattled as if protesting her words. Then came a sound that froze them all, a faint, deliberate knock at the door. Who would be out here at this hour? Eva asked, her voice unsteady. Liam checked the security cameras he'd set up. The screen showed nothing but the swaying trees. When the knock came again, louder this time, Alex decided to open the door. No one was there. Only a rusted lantern lay on the porch, its faint glow flickering as if beckoning them. This feels wrong, Liam muttered, but curiosity got the better of them. A journey into terror. They followed a narrow path, illuminated by the lantern's dim light. The deeper they ventured into the woods, the colder the air became. The forest was unnaturally quiet, the silence broken only by their nervous breaths. In a small clearing, they found ancient symbols etched into the ground, surrounding a gnarled tree that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. We should leave, Naomi whispered, but Eva's curiosity drove her closer. She reached out to touch the tree, ignoring Naomi's warnings. The moment her hand made contact, the symbols flared to life, and a guttural scream ripped through the night. The forest erupted with movement. Shadows, tall and formless, emerged from the trees, their hollow eyes glowing faintly as they closed in on the group. The Watcher's warning panicked. They fled back to the cabin, slamming the door behind them. Naomi frantically searched the journal for answers. The Watcher feeds on fear, she read aloud. It's drawn to those who acknowledge its existence. Her voice quivered as she realized they had already crossed the line. The cabin's lights flickered, and the shadows began to claw at the windows. Liam's attempts to call for help were futile. Every signal was blocked. We're trapped, he said, his voice hollow. A fight for survival. Naomi's trembling hands turned the pages of the journal until she found a ritual that promised to banish the Watcher. It required them to confront their deepest fears and stand united. Armed with nothing but their resolve and items mentioned in the journal, they stepped outside to face the entity. The Watcher emerged, a grotesque, ever-shifting mass of their fears made manifest. Eva faced her terror of drowning. Alex fought his fear of losing control. Liam grappled with the unknown. And Naomi? She confronted the realization that her stories had unleashed this nightmare. The final confrontation. As they performed the ritual, the forest roared in defiance. The Watchers' tendrils of darkness lashed out, pulling them toward an abyss. But Naomi's voice, steady and resolute, recited the final words of the incantation. A blinding light erupted, consuming the Watcher and driving the shadows back into the void. The aftermath. When the light faded, the forest was still. The symbols and the cursed tree had vanished, leaving no trace of the horror they had endured. Exhausted, they returned to the cabin, packed their belongings, and left at dawn, vowing never to speak of the night again. As they drove away, Naomi glanced at the journal, now blank except for a single line. The Watcher sleeps, but its gaze lingers. Naomi never told another horror story again. The echoing woods. I shouldn't be here. Not in this room, not in this town, and definitely not in this chair telling you what happened. But I owe it to them, the ones who didn't make it out. I owe it to myself too. Maybe if I speak it out loud, I'll stop hearing those voices. It all started last summer when we decided to rent that cabin. 4 of us, me, my best friend Caleb, his girlfriend Mia, and her younger sister Lily. We'd been planning the trip for months, a weekend to unwind, to disconnect from the noise of the city. Caleb found the cabin online, and it looked perfect, secluded, surrounded by trees, and cheap enough that we didn't question why. We arrived on a Friday evening, just as the sun was setting. The cabin was rustic, exactly how we'd imagined it. Wooden floors that creaked under every step, a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years, and windows that offered nothing but a view of endless forest. It was quiet. Almost too quiet, but we brushed it off. The first night was uneventful. We played cards, drank too much wine, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. By the time we stumbled into bed, the world outside was pitch black. No stars, no moonlight. Just an ocean of darkness pressing against the windows. The first voice came the next morning. I was the first to wake up, eager to get a head start on breakfast. As I stood in the tiny kitchen, I heard it, a faint whisper, low and indistinct, coming from outside. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard my name. Ethan. It was soft, almost tender, like someone calling me from far away. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Ethan, come here. I laughed nervously, shaking it off as my imagination. Maybe it was a trick of the wind or the remnants of a dream. But when I glanced out the window, the forest stared back, silent and still. When I mentioned it to the others, Caleb shrugged it off. Old cabins are creepy, he said. You probably just heard an echo or something. But then Mia heard it too. That afternoon, while we were hiking, she suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Did you hear that? She asked, her face pale. Hear what? Caleb replied, his voice tinged with annoyance. It said my name, Mia whispered, from over there. She pointed toward a cluster of trees, their branches twisted like gnarled fingers. We laughed it off again, but there was tension in the air now, a heaviness that clung to us like a second skin. That night, the voices came back, louder. We were sitting by the fireplace when Lily suddenly dropped her mug, spilling hot cocoa all over the floor. Lily, what the hell? Caleb started, but she cut him off. Shh, listen. The cabin fell silent, and for a moment all we heard was the crackling of the fire. Then it came, the whispers. This time, we all heard them, faint, yet clear enough to recognize. Caleb, Mia, Lily, and then mine, Ethan. They weren't random. They weren't echoes. They were deliberate, intimate, like someone standing just outside the window, calling to us. Panic set in. Caleb grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside, yelling into the darkness. Who's out there? But there was no answer. just the endless sea of trees, their shadows stretching like dark specters under the moonlight. The next morning, we found footprints, bare, human footprints, circling the cabin. That was when we decided to leave, but the forest wouldn't let us go. The whispers followed us, growing louder and more insistent. The trees seemed to close in, the paths winding back to where we started. And then we realized the truth. The voices weren't coming from outside. They were coming from within. Each whisper dredged up a secret we'd buried deep. Mia confessed to cheating on Caleb. Lily admitted she'd lied to get someone expelled from school. And me? I said things I can't even repeat here. Things I'd sworn to take to my grave. The cabin didn't want us to leave. It wanted us to confess. By the time the sun rose on Sunday, we were no longer the people who had arrived on Friday. Caleb was gone, vanished into the woods. Lily wouldn't speak. And Mia just stared into the fire, whispering apologies to no one in particular. I don't remember how I made it out, but I did. The others didn't. Now every night I hear them, Caleb, Mia, Lily, calling my name. They want me to come back. And sometimes when the wind is just right, I want to. The cabin that calls. I can't tell you why I went back to that cabin. It wasn't curiosity, and it certainly wasn't because I felt safe there. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was because it wouldn't stop calling me. Every dream, every quiet moment, that cabin's shadow lingered in my mind. It started after I got the letter. The cabin had belonged to my great-grandmother, a woman I'd never met. I only knew her name, stitched into the bottom of a family quilt, Agnes Hawthorne. My mother barely spoke of her, and when she did, it was with an odd mixture of reverence and fear. So, when I learned I'd inherited Agnes's cabin in the woods, I almost ignored it. Almost. The place was hours from anywhere, deep in the heart of a forest so thick it swallowed cell service. The dirt road leading to it was overgrown, the trees forming a canopy that blotted out the sky. By the time I saw the cabin, the sun was setting, casting long skeletal shadows across the yard. It was old, weathered, and leaning slightly to one side, like it was tired of standing. But something about it called to me. Inside, the air was stale, and the wooden floors groaned under my feet. Dust clung to every surface, but it wasn't abandoned. A fire had been lit recently, and the kettle on the stove was still warm. I should have left then. Instead, I stayed. I found the diary that night, tucked away in a drawer beneath a stack of faded photographs. It was Agnes's, her handwriting spidery and uneven. The cabin speaks to me, one entry read. Its voice is soft, like a song I've always known, but the more I listen, the more it demands, the more it takes. At first, I thought it was just the ramblings of a lonely old woman, but then the knocking started. It was faint at first, like the tap of a branch against the window, but there were no branches that close to the cabin. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Always 3 times, always from the same spot, the floorboards beneath the kitchen table. I tried to ignore it, but it got louder, more insistent. When I finally pried up the boards, I found the hatch. It was small, locked with an iron padlock that looked older than the cabin itself. The diary mentioned it only once. What lies beneath must never be freed. The cabin calls to protect its secret. I should have left, but the whispers started that night. They called my name, soft and urgent, begging me to open the hatch. I don't remember deciding to do it. One moment I was sitting by the fire, and the next I was standing over the hatch holding a crowbar. When I broke the lock, the whispering stopped, and something else began. I can't describe what I saw when I opened it. Not fully. It wasn't a room or even a space. It was endless. A void filled with flickering shapes, shadows that moved like they were alive. They looked at me, through me, and I felt something reach out, brushing against my mind. The next thing I remember is running, the cabin shrinking behind me as I stumbled through the forest. But the whispers followed. They're still following. I don't know what I freed that night, but I know it's waiting, and I know it's hungry. The cabin didn't just call to me, it called to something else. The endless winter. They warned us about the storm, but we didn't listen. It was supposed to be a quick getaway, a weekend in the mountains to celebrate our anniversary. The cabin wasn't fancy, but it was perfect for us. A cozy little retreat surrounded by snow-covered pines. The kind of place where the world felt a million miles away. The snow began to fall as we unpacked, soft and delicate, like a scene from a postcard. By nightfall, it had turned into a blizzard. The wind howled around the cabin, rattling the windows and making the fire in the hearth sputter. But we were warm, wrapped in blankets and sipping hot chocolate. It felt like we were the only two people on Earth. We didn't realize that, in a way, we were. The first sign was the clock. I remember glancing at it as I stirred my cocoa, 7:45 p.m. Later, when I looked again, it was still 7:45. The hands hadn't moved. Neither had the firewood in the hearth. The flames crackled and danced, but the logs remained untouched, as if they were immune to the heat. "It's just a weird power outage," Daniel said, brushing it off. But his voice trembled. The second sign was the snow. By morning, the storm should have passed, but the snow was still falling, thick and endless. When I opened the front door, I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. It was like the world beyond the cabin had been erased. Daniel tried to dig a path to the car, but he didn't get far. No matter how much snow he shoveled, it seemed to pile up faster than he could clear it. He gave up after an hour, his breath coming in frantic gasps. The third sign was the silence. By the second day, the storm had stopped making noise. The wind, the trees, even our voices felt muted, like the world was holding its breath. And then we noticed the marks. They appeared on the windows first, long, jagged scratches that hadn't been there the night before. Then on the walls, the floors, even the ceiling. It was as if something was inside the cabin with us, carving its presence into every surface. Daniel swore he saw movement in the forest, dark shapes flitting between the trees. But when I looked, there was nothing. By the third day, we stopped trying to leave. The food in the pantry never ran out, no matter how much we ate. The firewood never burned away. Even the water seemed infinite, as if the cabin was keeping us alive. But it wasn't kindness. I found the journal hidden in a false drawer under the bed. It belonged to someone named Claire, the cabin's last occupant. Her entries started cheerful, then became frantic. "The snow won't stop. The days won't move. I don't know how long I've been here. They watch me. I can see them at night, just outside the windows. I think they're waiting for me to go to sleep. I don't want to become one of them. I don't want to be forgotten." The final entry was a single sentence, scrawled over and over until the ink bled through the pages. "The cabin doesn't let you go. It makes you stay." Daniel disappeared on the 6th day. I woke up to find the front door wide open, his footprints leading into the woods. I screamed his name, but there was no answer, just the endless, suffocating snow. Now it's just me. The clock still says 7:45. The snow still falls, and the shadows at the edge of the forest are closer now. I don't know how much longer I can stay awake.